Hi everyone, my name is Lulu and welcome back to the Financial Corner. Many of us, often without realizing it, allow our spending habits to grow out of control and wreak havoc on our bank accounts. This presentation will focus on the 10 financial sins of spending we can all afford to avoid and tips for overcoming them. Part 1 will cover the first 5 and part 2 will cover the last 5. So the first financial sin, number 1, to avoid is to strive to be unemotional with your spending or your purchasing. Behavioral psychology tells us that emotional decision making can affect not just the outcome of the decision, but the speed at which you make it. The goal is to live below our means and not exhaust all our income as soon as we receive it. If you desire to achieve financial freedom, you need to bridge the gap between comfort and contentment as well as needs and luxuries. Houses, cars, clothes, and food are needs. But when we have a habit of spending on these luxuriously over and above their scope of use, we run the risk of spending to sustain a lavish life or status that will cost us more than it benefits us. It's easy to get caught up in image, and many people try to maintain an air of wealth or affluence by buying things they cannot afford. Even you may succumb to pretentious tendencies at times, and perhaps you purchase a brand name over the generic or rely on a credit card for a hot item you don't have cash for, all in pursuit of admiration from others. Remember that overspending will eventually catch up with you. It's okay to admit it when you can't afford something, and sometimes you have to. Don't let your ego hinder your financial well-being. A car, as we know, is a mode of transport. A house provides shelter. Why buy a luxurious car that will cost you a fortune when you can get a reasonably priced car that achieves the same purpose? Why buy a house with 10 bedrooms when you only need 3 bedrooms? You may have occasional episodes, I understand, of luxury, but if this becomes a lifestyle and you desire to be financially free, you will be working against your desired goals. Remember, the cost of a car does not only entail the monthly installments. You also need to factor in the cost of insurance, fuel, and service plans. For a house, you need to consider insurance, life covers, the rates and taxes, and for sectional titles, the levies. These are all monthly costs that filter into your budget, and the more lavish your taste, the higher these costs of maintaining and sustaining these needs. Financial sin number 2 is skipping payments or making payments late on your credit. If you have any form of credit, you need to pay on time and avoid skipping payments. It's not enough that you are paying. If you are paying late, that affects your credit score because you give the perception to credit providers that you cannot be trusted. Many of us do not know our credit history and credit scores and wonder why we are not considered for mortgage bonds. And one of these reasons is attributed to compromised credit scores. Some of us deliberately skip our debit orders by transferring our income to our other bank accounts. We then spend money on other endeavors instead of being faithful to our commitments. This also works out to disadvantages in the long term. The third financial sin to avoid is not knowing where your money goes on a monthly basis. Many of us are already broke before we even get paid because we don't keep a budget to avoid frivolous spending. And that's why we struggle to get through the month without borrowing money from people. Then you have those who budget on paper, but they do not follow the budget and end up thinking they have holes in their pockets because their money never lasts through the month. A reconciliation of your actual versus budget is an essential practice. Remember that a budget registers your intention and the actual registers your spending habits and your relationship with money. You need to reconcile your actual versus budget, and that way you will be in a better position to see what you need to adjust in your spending habits that is costing you your financial freedom. If you don't plan, remember you are planning to fail. The fourth financial sin to avoid is not having emergency funds to weather your storms in times of a crisis. Many of us are living from paycheck to paycheck, and we don't have a buffer for emergencies. Plan for the unforeseen events and learn to put money away systematically. We end up financially distressed and wallowing back in bad habits of debt because we do not discipline ourselves to prepare for the rainy days. In Proverbs 21 verse 20 it says, "The wise save for the future, and the foolish spend everything that they get." So saving money is a wise decision from our wise King Solomon. Financial sin number 5 is living on overdrafts. There are people who think it's not a risk to have overdrafts, but in reality that is a trap because you are living on borrowed funds. And to rely on your monthly salary to cover the overdrafts, only to go back into your negative account, is a financial sin to avoid. This creates a ripple effect of living on debt. Proverbs 22 verse 7 says the rich rules over the poor and the borrower is slave of the lender. This is obvious financial caution to would-be borrowers because you cannot rely on eggs that have not hatched. What happens if there is an economic crisis and you're retrenched? How will you buffer for the downside? Don't slack on regularly monitoring your finances. If you are careless or indifferent about staying up to date with your financial standing, you'll eventually suffer the consequences of high credit card and loan interest rates due to unknown factors like fraud or mistakes on your credit report. Take a proactive approach to managing your finances and ensure you're not spending more than you have. That brings us to the first part of the 5 financial sins to avoid. And until we meet again for part 2, stay blessed.